So finally, the last slide, what are the key issues and way forward when you talk about innovation in infrastructure for local governments, for small towns, rural towns? Local government capacity is very important. We talk about public sector leverage. We talk about how the government needs to play a bit more role in terms of getting people to want to invest. You cannot really make it in a way that, you know, private sector come in. I'm just going to give you a favorable investment climate. You know, you just come in. The government needs to do some of the heavy lifting because, and I think what is important is we often think that it's all just about funding, and because it's rural town, let the government fund. There's a lot of infrastructure that would benefit from extended private sector involvement. We're looking at, you know, I came and visited many of my areas. The roads, with less than 2 years, they already deteriorate massively. I mean, the life of a road is 5 years, and you need to do your maintenance, 5 years maintenance, periodic. And that even during periodic, you don't really have a non-functioning asset. But here, we see that the lack of, you know, between the design, the construction, and the durability of the asset, we have that challenge in small town. So what we need is the capacity and the understanding that private sector, the industry has the expertise to actually deliver more quality infrastructure. And that's what we want to do. We want to have a better scheme to deliver that. So the institutional capacity to prioritize and prepare project and package project is very important in the local government. Fiscal capacity, we're talking about the fiscal capacity. The tax system right now is still inclined towards central government. If I want to increase my economy, the income tax and value-added tax, they are all payable to the central government. So don't worry if you see that the local government budget is dominated by transfer payment, because most of the taxes in the economy goes to the central government. So the transfers are inevitable. So don't worry about that. Central government will keep on transferring to the local government because the taxation system is in that way. And in terms of risk management also, the capability to enter into contracts, whether local government can honor contracts, whether local government can actually manage their obligations within a contract. In my previous capacity in the Ministry of Finance as the Government Infrastructure Guarantee Fund, we're seeing more and more that this thing can be facilitated. But this remains a challenge, and there needs to be a concerted effort to get this through. The last two is straightforward leadership. When you talk about rural infrastructure, rural town, most likely it's really not about following a trade. You building the ship first and then let the trade come in. Therefore, I think what the chairman presented with the Trans-Sumatra, how you bundle it, most likely your infrastructure project has to really gel with what is the strategic economic project. I have a port project, but it doesn't stand alone. The port project has to really gel with my regional connectivity, with the industrialization plan, and that is important. And if you do it piecemeal, it's a disaster recipe. So the importance of synergizing and bundling between infrastructure and economic development initiative becomes even more important, and it can extend the room for private participation. For example, in Trenggalek, we have massive pine forests where we can extract the sap and produce gum rosin, turpentine, and so on and so on. We cannot build the factory, but we have abundant raw material. So that is where the infrastructure and the economic development, if we can package that into one PPP, where we can have the expertise to at least produce and the government become an off-taker, because we can take market risk, but we cannot take production risk, for example. Extending that and including the supporting infrastructure like the hauling road and the port, that will actually be very relevant for economic initiatives in rural areas and small towns. Project de-risking is how we actually let the government take on some of the important risk and then let the private sector come in the right stage of the risk. So availability payment, for example, let's not talk about demand. You build infrastructure, operate it during the life cycle within the right capacity, don't worry about the demand. If it turns out that the demand is higher, then the upside goes to the government. If it's lower, the downside is borne by the government. So this is some of the form of de-risking. And finally, partnership. Stakeholder participation is important. And let me tell you that in local areas, actually, the desire and willingness of the community to be part of the development is really high. And you can actually cut some of the main costs from there. You can actually have lower construction costs because you say that this is something that the community can actually contribute. Interregional collaboration is very important. Most projects would probably involve having 2 or 3 adjacent regions. So this is where associations like APKASI, the Association of Local Government, is very important. And finally, viability gap funding is from the Ministry of Finance. Finally, just to close, I came back from South Korea in September. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing for Development has been set up in 2014, I think. And there is indeed insufficient financing. One of the key of doing a long-term performance-based infrastructure program is to have a joint financing scheme between the central government and the local government. So both central government and local government has to really do a long-term joint financing plan. We need to be able to sit together. Now we can't. We don't have that platform. It's always done on an annual basis. We don't know what the central government is going to fund for the next 2 years, 3 years, and it makes planning difficult. Let's agree, the next 5 years, this is our plan, this is our program. What is the minimum level of support that the central government can provide? This is something that I can provide from my own internal revenue. Doing that allows you to have a coherent infrastructure plan. You cannot do it on an annual basis. So this is really, and one of the form of participating in that is viability gap funding. So with that, I think I conclude my presentation for today. Hopefully it answers about some of the areas of innovation for rural and small town infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pak Emil. I will invite the next speaker, Bapak Rainier Haryanto, from Program Director for KPPIP. Please, Pak.
Good day, everyone. Distinguished speaker, I think I'm very honored to actually sit next to the Deputy Minister and also Bupati Trenggalek as well. I think what I present today is probably totally opposite with what Pak Emil presented. I'm totally on delivery. That's the focus of the unit I'm actually sort of sitting with. And not only delivery, I'm also probably so different as well, where I'm Pak Bupati, I end up sort of focusing on the regional project. I'm totally opposite. I end up working on the mega project and major projects. So I know the chairman is actually asking me in terms of presenting about KPPIP, but I think it's quite unfair if I end up sort of just presenting about KPPIP without understanding the background why KPPIP is being formed. So let me start with, if we talk about KPPIP, and of course the KPPIP is one of part of the innovation that government of Indonesia is introduced. So first thing is to understand about why it's actually KPPIP and how complex it's actually we talk about Indonesia. So I know a lot of people have already seen this, and the chairman already mentioned about the budgeting as well, and how is it interlinked. The fact is, in this new current period of government, I think it's in order to actually achieve certain economic growth, I think people understand that infrastructure is required. And we're talking about not only 1, 2, 10, 20, we're talking about 1,600 plus projects needs to develop between 2015 and 2019. And understanding about the limitation that Indonesia has, particularly on the budgeting, where I think in the previous slide that the chairman mentioned that reality-wise, we're talking about local government budget and also the central government budget is only able to actually fund probably almost about only 40%. And the question, of course, what happened with the next 60%? And this is where I think you've been hearing a lot of things from the government, especially from the president himself, that he would like to actually bring in private sector participation to actually develop this project. But I think talking about private sector is pretty unique. I used to work on the private sector side, and working on the private sector side, you always look projects so different. You always coming back to the first thing: what's the value of my investment? How much return can I get? And of course, lastly, if I want to put one investment, can I get more investment later on, down the road? So that's why I'm sort of, I think, and when I just jump across to the government, I start to realize that I think the government is not really totally quiet. They truly listen. And that's why, I think the chairman mentioned about 3 fiscal reform actions being carried out by the government. But in fact, it's actually these 3, it's only the 3 groups. And it's actually, there are a lot of long lists that the government has done in order to actually attract the private sector to actually invest in the country. But I'm just sort of touch base a bit before I end up sort of talking about KPPIP. So let me talk about fiscal reforms. I think if you talk about infrastructure, In the past, I recall I came here 7 years ago after operating overseas, and first thing I realized that the government of Indonesia, they don't even actually bother to allocate enough budget to prepare a project. And through my career around the world, that the key thing on the success project delivery is always come back to the good project preparation. And years ago, there wasn't such thing enough facility of money to actually prepare a project. But now, yes, the government already introduced facility which is currently sitting in the Ministry of Finance and also with us as in KPPIP. But in addition with that as well, in the past is when we talk about PPP, concession of toll road, it's pretty rare for people actually, government actually introduce some sort of additional facility. But nowadays, I think government already issue regulation and start to introduce other facilities like VGF and affability payment that Pak Emil already mentioned as well. And there are a number of things that's been introduced, but that's probably on the fiscal side. Institutional side, I think everyone understands after 1998, economics pretty struck, and everyone has a doubt, and then the measure is totally different. Even like in the country, I spent a lot of years in Australia. When you talk about risk, especially international risk, it's always risk at first. I think government realized that, and that's why they started to introduce like an organization where I used to work, IIGF, to provide a guarantee. And other institutions as well, like SMI, which are actually providing an initial funding to help a project running. On that particular one, because I mean, like over the past few years, I've observed about Indonesia infrastructure. One of the biggest issues of Indonesia is, in developing Indonesia infrastructure is actually the equity part. Everyone talk about, yes, money are over there, money is floating. I spoke to a lot of my mates overseas, and everyone say, oh, don't worry about the money. But when people start to talk about invest on equity, everyone intend to actually do research first and step back. And this is why the SMI and also the subsidiary of SMI, IIF, being formed, to just help to actually give a bit flavor to help the some project moving. So hopefully with that, it will attract more investors to come in. Lastly, the KPPIP, I don't want to talk in details. I will sort of explain it later on about KPPIP, but just give you a general idea. I think with all the stakeholders spread across Indonesia, sometimes one of the most difficult ones is actually coordinating all the stakeholders, and that's where the KPPIP sits. And I will explain it later on. Lastly, I don't want to mention anything about regulatory reform. I think everyone here already know about what's happening. Economic packages been introduced. Government tried to simplify all the licensing. Government introduced new regulation to actually reduce some of the tax and so on and so forth. So I don't want to go into the details on that. But I just want to show this presentation to you guys over here, because I'm not sure how familiar you are in terms of all the reforms, but the fact is the government are actually already starting from all the way from beginning, all the way up to the end, which means that during project preparation, government introduced something new, reform a lot of things, and during the construction and also the tender process itself, there's a lot of facilities being introduced. So I don't want to go into the details because I think affability payment, a lot of people in here is very familiar. But if you're not familiar, it's just another method of returning the investment in such a way where in the past, private sector intends to take the whole risk, or particularly the demand risk. Now the government is actually willing to take the demand risk, which means that after the post-construction, government end up sort of paying the certain regular payment back to the investor to actually reduce some of the risk out. I think another thing that's been government been introducing and then also sort of enforcing is actually the issue on land acquisition. And if you've been operating in Indonesia, the most common issue is actually land. Second, normally land, after that permit. So if we talk about land acquisition, I think everyone hear about law number 2, 2012, but everyone of course questioning, so how is the implementation? It's been done very quietly, but the fact is this has been run in a number of projects that are under our portfolio, and it's been actually operate successfully. So there's a lot of certainty in terms of land acquisition, and actually speaking to the number probably representing people from operating in Indonesia private sector side, I've been hearing about story that one particular company they tried to acquire land for their power project. A few years ago, it took them 3.5 years. With this new law, apparently they managed to actually do it within 4 months. So that's sort of quite significant improvement on the land acquisition side.